with Aloha Authentic.
Aloha mai kako, and welcome to another episode of Aloha Authentic with Kamakapili. My name hasn't changed, it's still Kamakapili. I want to just be able to share this show is about sharing artists and the art and the work and the stories that they put into their work. So thank you and very much for tuning in today. Our artist and special guest for today is 6th generation Lauhala weaver Keoua Nelsen. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hello.
Mahalo nui.
Thanks for having me on the
Oh,
show.
no, thank you. Before we get into talking story with Keoua, if you haven't seen last episode last month, we talked to very special funny man himself, Uncle Walter Kawaiʻaʻa, who is the protege of the late great Kahawanu Lake. That was a really cool episode to listen to what he had to share in context of aloha when it came to Hawaiian music. Before we get into talking with Keoua and the whole practice of Lauhala weaving, we have poke and we have poi on the table. The whole point of this, if it gets distracting, kalamai, but the whole point of an open bowl on the table, growing up for me, my tutu always said, when the bowl of poi is open on the table at dinner time, there is no negativity that is spoken. You know, there is no, everything that comes out and all the mana that has been shared is all positive, and it's about healing and it's about creation and it's about just continuing, you know, the life that's on the table. So the poi on the table today is representing that everything that we're talking about is going to be all pono. It's going to be all about aloha, so I hope you enjoy it. Getting straight into it. 6th generation, Lauhala weaver. I can only imagine how many stories that has been told to you and that you can be able to share. So 6th generation, but how deep does this practice of Lauhala weaving really go into your family?
Actually goes pretty deep, but as far as weaving, I just remember my great-grandmother and my grandmother weaving, and all of her sisters. So, you know, there's a time when my grandmother and all of her sisters sat on our front porch, and all they would do all day is clean Lauhala and weave. Which is interesting, is even though I'm 6th generation, I actually haven't only been weaving until like 6 or 7 years ago.
Wow.
So, you know, Hawaiians believe ika manawa kupono, right? And for me, when grandma tried to teach me when I was in college, I just couldn't get it.
Yeah.
She sat me down and says, boy, come here, learn this. And it just wasn't working. So I said, that's okay, grandma. I just go clean Lauhala for you. Go clean and prep, and you guys just sit and weave. You know, and so just growing up, we grew up like going camping with the specific reason for picking Lauhala. And you're talking piles and piles and piles of Lauhala that we just sat there and cleaned.
Wow. And how long was that phase for you of just focusing on that part of?
You know, because at that
practice?
time I was in college, so every time I came home for summer or spring break,
Yeah.
that's when I would just go sit and just go clean Lauhala for grandma. And every day on the porch, nothing but Lauhala rolls, Lauhala products, Lauhala hats, mats, baskets, you name it, they wove it. They wove it.
And that was their practice of sustaining themselves.
It was their practice for sustaining themselves. One of the things that my grandmother always told me is, as a young child, they would come home from school, and my great-grandmother would make them sit down and weave. So my great-grandma would actually make the paw of the hat, and then they would actually have to weave down the side of the block before they could do homework and go play.
Yeah.
What I found out was my great-grandmother's hats were being bartered to this Chinese storekeeper in San Francisco.
What?
Yeah, so I was like, wait. So you're telling me they got my hats, our grandma's hats, like somewhere out in the United States. They would barter for like material, food. So the storekeeper would come from San Francisco, come down, and barter for hats and materials and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how they sustain their living, you know, besides picking coffee, right?
Yeah.
So, but when no more coffee season, that's what they did.
Yeah. So you said, the top part of the hat is called pale.
The paw.
Pa.
Yeah.
And that's where this is where you begin the hat.
So actually every hat starts with a piko.
Okay.
And there's different styles of picos. Like this is a makamoena, indicative of mat weave, single weave. And there's different types of pico, like I said, but every hat starts with a pico. So we start with the paw before we bring it down on the hat block.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you have this. We have this beautiful art piece that I see that you can probably use more every day than the hat, which is beautiful. But I see that this one has color.
Yeah.
So you incorporate color within your, and how do you come about with coloring your?
You know, so typically Lauhala actually has two different types. I mean, you have natural dark Lauhala. It's just hard to find. They have them as dark as like that red velvet from the red velvet cake. That's what we call our red Lauhala. And that is so hard to get, which would actually kind of look like this really dark brown, reddish color. But this, we used good old natural RIT dye, you know, and so I actually haven't experimented with natural dyes because I don't know if it'll take.
Like retaining wise.
Retain the actual color.
Yeah.
But, so we use RIT dye, and typically you'll find dyed products in more contemporary pieces. So something like this Hydro Flask cover, definitely what we want to do is we kind of want to showcase the patterns that are on, which is why we use a two-tone color. Two-tone color weaving products are called annoni. Annoni.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll see that in hats as well, but those are typically the really dark brown, red, chocolate colored kind of.
And I see, so we have this table full of his papale on this side, and I see that black Mad Hatter looking hat, which looks really cool, I have to say.
So actually, this one here is actually dyed as well. And then I just kind of did an overlay here of the pattern so you could actually see it. So kind of just wanting to play around with the old styles of, I guess, top hats. Yeah. So this hat will be featured in the upcoming Wearable Arts Fashion Show.
Right on.
This and a few others. So just kind of playing around with it, you know, taking a look at old styles, bringing them back, but using contemporary practices to create the colors and stuff like that.
Good, perfect segue, because my next question, which I really want to hear your mana'o on, is with a traditional practice such as weaving, mats and such, and papale are more of a contemporary modern piece, what is your mana'o on intertwining traditions with an innovative, more contemporary means?
And that's a really good question because I always have this philosophical questions with a lot of my kupuna as well. My great-grandparents or my grandmother would say, you know what, if it can be woven, weave them. You know, my mana'o is that in order for stuff like this to live and survive, we got to evolve with the modern times. You know, one of the greatest sellers of hats are the fedora-style hats, only because it's made popular by Bruno Mars and all that kind of stuff. But this is how we attract the opio or the youngsters to learn and carry on our practices. You know, and for us, maintaining our resources, maintaining the weaving practices is very important. But if we cannot attract them in, then the art is lost, right? So, which is kind of the reason why I started weaving. I noticed, you know, in my family, only 2 or maybe 3 people were weaving, and I felt it was my kuleana to perpetuate everything that my kupuna did, which is why I started really getting into it. And then as I started working with hala, noticed only plenty makua and kupuna are weaving. And the hardest—
they're the ones who have the patience. No. I give you big props because I know I would have a hard time, at least with patience-wise, sitting there and—
I tell you, it's very meditative, very meditative, and which is really interesting because the weaving part is the easiest part.
Oh, really?
It's the gathering, the prepping, the cleaning, it's the hardest part. And again, right, so when we're taking a look at our kupunas going out to go maintain our trees and gather, it's hard work. You know, so any chance I get to get out there and gather some lauhala for our kupunas, I'm out there. Trust me, it's not an easy job.
Yeah, so what would that entail, the prepping to make this? What does that entail?
Actually, you know, it goes back to the maintenance of the tree and actually starting from when the trees are cakey. You know, lauhala is very fickle and you need to tell the tree what its purpose is. And if you don't say that, hey, we're gonna use you, we're gonna give you junk leaves. So you gotta go out every month, you gotta clean out all the dead leaves, the ones that are not good. You gotta kind of prune it back. And only then the tree gonna say, okay, you know what, now I'm gonna give you something worthy. But from the time we plant one keiki, it takes 7 years before it can harvest good leaves. 7 years. So in and of itself, that's a very long process. And then once you get the leaves, you know, you have 2 different types of varieties. One with thorns, one without thorns. So that means taking out all the thorns from the leaf, which means, you know, your hand get bust up. And just softening it and just putting it into rolls and just let it sit for a couple of weeks before we actually start to weave. Thornless ones are good because you don't have to take out the thorns. But for me, my preference is the one with the thorns. It becomes supple. The leaf to me is more leathery and supple and just kind of hardy. So I can work it, I can pull it, I can tug it, and I'm not going to break. Then also where the tree is growing makes a big difference.
Oh.
Trees next to the ocean tend to be better to work with than versus trees from the mountain. The leaves tend to
Okay.
get moldy much faster, which means you need more care.
Yeah.
Lauhala trees need a lot of sun, an equal amount of rain,
Mm-hmm.
and just a lot of TLC, because otherwise you're not going to get good leaves. Trust me. And you know, this hat right here I actually made for my mom. This Lauhala actually came from the same tree that my great-grandmother picked from in Kona.
Wow.
Yeah, same tree that she picked. You can tell Lauhala from Kona actually because it actually has a golden buttercream color.
Oh, really? So it varies from
Yeah,
because of the environment.
because of the environment. And that brings up a good point, because if I find a tree that gives me red leaves, if I took a keiki and planted it somewhere else, I may not necessarily get red leaves. So what I started to realize is the soils, the environment, the sun, the rain, everything play a part on what kind of leaf you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very fickle. It's not just a matter of gathering leaves. You got to pick the right leaf
Yeah.
before you can actually start to
So
weave.
it, like other practices, it's very much of a spiritual connection.
It
to
kind of
it.
is. You know, when you take a look at the word hala, right? Hala means to pass or, you know, die.
Yeah.
And I always say that Lauhala is original reuse, recycle, and repurpose material. Why else can you take something that's dead
Yeah.
and bring life into it?
Yeah.
Whether it's a papale or, you know, a bottle cover, mats, what better resource to use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to point out that when you say Lauhala, just a quick little ʻŌlelo, Hawaiian Educational 101, hala, also other than the translation he gave, is the actual name of the tree. When you say Lauhala, we're not talking about the tree, we're talking about the leaf, because lau itself means leaf. So Lauhala means the leaf of the hala tree.
Right.
Just putting that out there.
Well, and then, you know, as far as educational wise, the actual name for the tree is called puhala.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that.
So puhala is actually the name of the hala tree. The
Okay.
lau is the leaf from the hala tree.
Okay.
Yeah. And got plenty of other uses as well, like the root from the hala tree. I just learned how to make some cordage. So I've been using that to make cordage for, you know, just different types of products and
Yeah,
projects.
I
and
know on a la'au end, when the hala tree is a medicinal tree, the medicinal part of the tree is the roots.
Yeah.
But it has to be an aerial root, which means that the root itself doesn't connect itself to the ground. And this is just according to the traditions that I've been learning from, that it's those aerial roots, and what it is used for is for reproductive purposes, for both, more specifically for men, that they would strain it and they would take a drink or whatever from that. So it's
Yeah.
very multi-purposeful tree.
And I also heard that it's also used for asthma as well.
Oh, really?
The same part of
Yeah.
the root is used for asthma as well. So
Yeah.
never
Right
try
on.
them yet, you know.
Yeah.
Never
Never tried 'em yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so I know, and you brought it up, the whole point of your kuleana.
Yeah.
What is it that really brought that responsibility aspect to your attention?
You know, just a little more ʻŌlelo here. Growing up, I was really brought up in the Western way. You know, go and get nice corporate job and everything. And then when I moved back from the mainland, started really getting rooted into my culture. And then I started seeing things that were just being forgotten or you know, just nobody practiced them anymore. Especially when taking a look at my kupuna, you know, they were kalo farmers, they were canoe carvers, or hala weavers, or fishermen. And all the art was dying. So it's like, who's going to carry it on? So I took it upon myself as my kuleana to learn and do everything my kupuna did. So hala is just one facet of what I'm going to be working with. I'm actually hoping to make my upena, my fishnet.
Wow.
You know, that's something that I just want to do just because that's what both my grandfathers did.
Yeah.
You know, both my grandfathers were not Hawaiian, but they made fishnet. So, you know, I remember them sitting down behind the door making the fishnet. And I just really found that, if not me, who else?
Yeah.
You know, so while I love weaving, I love teaching as well. I love to perpetuate the craft. And not just the craft, again, from the maintenance of the tree, carrying it all the way through the weaving. For me, it's when you can do that, you can get really good leaf selection, and your products can come out much better.
Right on. So, with your kuleana, what is it that, like the mana'o and the mo'olelo and the kauna that you put into it, and your intention of what you want, you know, people to get out of it? What do you put into your products? Like even just by designs,
Yeah.
what do they speak about?
You know, actually, that's kind of like what you said about intentions. And so, if I have a hat order, I actually take a look at the person's ano, and I take a look at who they are before I actually start to design a hat for them. I'm not going to just make a hat for anybody. I'm going to take a look at who they are as a person, and I'm going to weave all good intentions into them. You know, and we may actually have all kinds of common patterns, but how I use the patterns and my intention for each of those patterns is the mo'olelo I pass on, because in my weaving is my essence, my ano, and all my mana go into my weaving. So when someone puts a hat onto their head, I want nothing but good mana and good mana'o going into their po'oya, which is where everything's coming from. So yeah, just a lot of good intentions. You know, it's been very meditative. You know, and then just really taking a look at the relationship of plants to weaving, and then just the relationships, the interrelationships. As we're weaving, what each strand actually means.
Yeah, because I mean, this hat in particular, just because we keep staring at it, is so detailed, and each piece is really small. And so I see also this piece next to it. What is that, and what is the purpose in this practice for that?
So typically when we gather our leaves, our leaves are, you know, quite wide. So we need to cut it down so that we can actually get the strips to weave. So these are cutters. And these two cutters in particular right here are my great-grandmother's cutters.
Wow.
And these are my great-grandmothers on my dad's side. So this is actually an old spring from a Model T that they actually took and filed down.
Wow.
To
so you literally make it.
They literally made it. Now,
Wow,
which is
no
interesting
kidding,
enough, I actually took a calibrator and I calibrated the spaces in between, and it's exactly 1/8 of an inch between each of those blades.
And how long did you think total to make this?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
It just goes to prove how long of a process this really is. Like, it's not something that you really can just go into the store and just.
Well, you know, now we
you
have
can
modern
now.
day cutters, which we use surgical blades and stuff like that. But when I was gifted these, I was told to bring life into them. So can I use them as museum pieces and just let them sit on the shelf, you know? Because that's what its purpose, we bring, again, life into our products.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's one thing that I've come to realize. And we also did a workshop with a Ni'ihau native, and his practice was making leis. And one thing that he always says is that he's very happy when he actually sees people wearing the leis that they make, because people, it's so nice that you don't want to wear it.
Right.
You don't want to destroy it. You don't want to ruin it anyway. So you keep it in your shelf, or you keep it all in your jewelry box or whatever. But you really don't give it any life, like you were saying. There's no mana that you put into it. So to actually have this and put it into play every day, wearing your hats, wearing your jewelry, is a really big part of the
practice. Which is interesting, because there's been hats that we were able to take a look at and go, oh yeah, this is my grandma's hat.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, just their style, you can tell their style, their cuts, the pico. Like, yeah, it's my grandma's hat.
Wow.
So to see people wear it, you know, and then not just my grandma's hat, but her sister's hats.
Yeah.
We can tell that, oh yeah, it's my auntie's hat. So it's good to see that people still wear them.
Yeah.
What's even more beautiful is every so often I have the honor of reshaping hats that were gifted down to people. And, you know, sometimes they get bent out of shape, so I'll reshape them.
Yeah.
And I've actually worked on hats that were like 50, 60, 70 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And just taking a look at the old styles. You know, for me, just to even touch them and just feel all that mana that goes into that, it's just pretty awesome, actually.
Wow. So, and then one of the questions I ask everybody who comes into the show, being it's called Aloha Authentic, in the context of Aloha, what does this practice in general, what do you think it has to offer the world when it comes to Aloha?
You know, I just think it's just another avenue in which we can share our culture, which is really interesting, because I had this guy walk into a store once and actually ordered a hat from the mainland. And he had saw a photo and he's like, you know, I really like this hat. Can you replicate it? And for him, it was a reminder of his trip to Hawaii, because it was his retirement trip. And so when I actually delivered the hat, he was so happy, you know. So again, it's just another piece that we can offer to the world of who we are as a people and our culture, you know. And then people appreciate handmade, crafted items. you know, they're going to appreciate for a lifetime. Because like I said, I've seen hats that are 50, 60, 70 years
Yeah.
old and still in awesome shape.
That's how what I really look at this practice is that you get something spiritual, you get something more unphysical that you can't touch, but you also take away something physical
Right.
that you can. So there's that really deeper connection to it. And
That brings up a good point, because like for me, when I do hats, I don't like to sell hats retail. I like to custom make them for
Yeah.
you, which means all my mana
yeah,
and all my good thoughts are going into it, right? So, and you taking a piece of me, you know, wherever you go. So,
yeah, right on. Well, so you have this hat, and what are the other styles? Like, how do you come up with the design of how the hat's gonna look? I mean, like, just this part of the hat is pretty cool. You know, like that looks like two hats put together.
Yeah, this hat is actually called a cup and saucer. So when you actually turn it over, it looks like a cup that's sitting on a plate.
Wow, it really is two pieces. Then.
No, actually, this is one.
Wow.
It's woven as a single piece. And so this is actually an old style, indicative of like the 40s and 50s Sunday, you know, tea hats.
Yeah.
This is a topless hat, which, you know, no more the top. These kind of hats are good for, I use them for beaches and, you know, my beach hats and stuff. Of course, this is for vahine because it's got nice, you know, scalloped edges
Yeah.
on them. How I come up with the style of the hat, this is kind of like a fedora hat right here. It's kind of nice and tall. It just depends on, again, who I'm making them for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you're talking, you have this all in your head that's
Yeah.
just starting to picture up. And
One of the things that I like to do is I like to make sure that if you're gonna get a hat from me, it looks like it was custom made for you, that the it's proportionate to you, and not something that you just picked off the
Yeah.
store rack. So many
Yeah.
times we actually put on a hat and it's like, yeah, I kind of like it, but a little bit too small, a little bit too big. And so by taking a look at, you know, a person's frame, head size, I can actually make a hat that can look like it was made just for you.
wow,
Yeah.
right on.
Yeah.
So as you know, being a practitioner of this practice, where do you see this practice today? Like, is it growing? Has it been like getting pushed in the back or?
No, you know, honestly, it's actually growing. And the interesting thing is more and more men are getting interested.
Yeah.
Weaving typically was a vahine type of craft or
Yeah.
job. The men would go gather. But for some reason, men have picked it up. And I see a lot more Kane getting interested, which is kind of surprising to me, you know. But we have people who are always interested in learning, always. You know, whether it's just making bracelets,
Yeah. Rings. That's the only
rings.
thing I got because it was the most patience I had at the time.
I tell you what, that's,
Getting there,
that's
getting there.
difficult to make.
Yeah, it
'cause
really
it's
was.
so small.
And you know, and that's why I look at things like this where each strip is really small in detail compared to one that's like this bigger.
Right.
The tediousness that comes to the practice that you have to have is just mind-boggling to me, especially when it comes to multi things, coming up with designs. I mean, I've seen other practitioners, and when they dye some low and then they have some natural low, and how they intertwine it and the things that they come up with is just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how you do that.
So, you know, I think, you know, going back to your question about innovation versus, you know, keeping things, you know, traditional, that's where we can come in with our innovation and coming up with new design patterns. I take a look at inspiration from Aotearoa, from their weavers, from Tahiti, and just seeing what I can incorporate from them, you know.
So it's a practice, really, how I see it, that it's not just Hawaii. You really get to connect with different cultures and relate and parallel yourself with. That to me is.
I had an honor
awesome.
of teaching a kupuna from Aotearoa how to make a hat, a two-tone colored hat. And the day she finished and put it on, she cried. And I was like, whoa, she's like, okay, you might kumu from this point forward. But, you know, once I got her started, it was all the same.
Yeah.
You know, so we're able to exchange ideas and patterns, even down to the closing of how we close hats. You know, it just made it more efficient and proficient. You know, so I just right there.
Yeah.
And just make things so much more easier and cleaner. So it's just that whole exchange of ideas, yeah.
Yeah. Right on. Well, I know the clock is ticking away, and we got to make sure I don't want to get cut off before we finish the conversation. So thank you very much, bro. I appreciate it very much for
Anytime.
coming.
Thank you again for having me on the
It was
show.
really awesome to listen to such a traditional practice, but also more of a contemporary today kind of a thing, and you know how we can mold it in and bridge the gap between traditional and contemporary,
Exactly.
and be able to find that pono balance.
Exactly.
So thank you very much for sharing your perspective from the Lauhala practice. We're going to have another show next month, so please stay tuned, and we're going to just continue to share more of the context of what Aloha really has to offer in different avenues that our kupuna did, as well as more modern contemporary artists and the stories that they have to share. So as we're heading out, no worry, next time we'll be bringing the poi. Other than that, and the poke. Have a good day.
Aloha.
Uiho.
See the spirit of aloha through the arts with aloha.